Hi, welcome to the Sifu Mimi Chan Show. Thanks for joining the conversation.
Hello, Oscar.
Hello, Mimi.
We are back in the home gym. We don't have a cool name for it like Dr. Mark Chang does for his
What's
home
his
gym.
name?
The Sanctum.
How about the Lair? Because I think that's where the Thundercats were.
Like a layer.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, not like a layer, like layer cake, but like a layer.
Right.
Is there a difference of how you say the word?
I would have to Google.
What do you call that in the English language? A homonym?
Another good question that I don't have the answer to.
Okay. So we are back in we're going to test it out, the lair. And we actually haven't gotten any feedback from our previous episode where we were stretching and moving around. So we're just going to go with it again because we're recording this prior to that release. So
Wow.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So for our listeners, we are in our lair and we're going to go through a little bit of mobility work as well as record this episode. So we are, dare I say, multitasking.
You're the queen of multitasking, so that makes perfect sense.
I think you said that last time.
I don't remember what I said this morning, so that makes perfect sense.
All right. So I have been nursing kind of a mild knee injury. I think we talked last time when last episode we talked about Machu Picchu and how I was like very grateful I didn't do the hike because I was also mildly injured. So today I thought I would take advantage of your expertise and just have you work on a little bit of mobility and things I could be doing on these off moments while we also have a little discussion.
I like it.
Yeah. Okay. So what are we doing first?
Well, since your knee is what's bothering you,
yes,
you could start off in just seeing how the knee feels as you move it around.
Okay.
I think it's funny because people say, oh, my knee hurts, what should I do? And my response always is, I don't know. If your knee hurts, like, don't do the things that hurt is, I guess, the first step. I'd rather ask, like, well, what are all the things that you can do that don't hurt? Mm-hmm. And just do that over and over again. But for the knee, one of the things that I like to start off with is just rotating. So, you know, all that mobility stuff that's gotten very popular, there is a system, that functional range conditioning system, that I think made it easy for people to identify things that they can do. So that's what I like about it, is that it gives you a point. I don't think it's the answer for everything, but what it does is it gives you a point where you can say, oh, let me test these things out. And as long as it's not causing pain, I'm all about it. So for the knee, what I like to do is I have my heel on the ground, mm-hmm. and then my knees bent at about 90 degrees. And then I just start rotating my foot and shin as if it's a rudder.
A rudder?
As if it's a rudder on a boat without moving the kneecap.
I was like, wow, we're doing boat terms.
Yeah, boat terms, yeah. I've never been on a boat until I was like 35 or something, but basically,
I was
yeah.
going to say it's very bougie.
Yeah.
You know,
mm-hmm.
in my weekend yacht rudder.
Right, my weekend yacht rudder. So that's one thing I think that anybody can do. And mm-hmm. just see, does that hurt? And the nice thing with this is as you rotate in and out, you can just test and see, well, is there a point that I rotate where it causes pain? And you're kind of meeting the position where you're like, oh, I can't hang out there. Mm. So
like a gentle.
It's you know what a former Wallum instructor who was a chiropractor used to say.
Your former roommate.
He was a roommate?
No, Spaceballs. Forget it. You missed it.
Got it.
I didn't execute well.
Okay, so he used to say something that stuck with me, which is like, you know, when you get injured, one, you should try to replicate the movement that caused you injury as close as you can without it causing pain. So he would use a wall as an example, saying this is the wall where pain is. Mm-hmm. You need to get super close to it without making contact.
Oh,
Like,
okay.
hello.
So not a caress or a touch, but
not even
up
touch,
to it.
just
Not
like
even
go right up
touching.
to it. And
Ah.
what you do is you approach it slowly.
Okay.
Like
Tai Chi slow.
Okay, right. And I always have liked that. And Dr. Mark Chen, I think, also said that's one of the benefits of doing something like Tai Chi or even Kung Fu very slowly, where it almost looks like Tai Chi, because you injured your knee doing Kung Fu, is start mimicking those movements slowly and exploring what you're able and not able to do, especially when it's something that's not extremely traumatic, right? Where you didn't have to go to see anyone, an orthopedic surgeon or something, right? Because it wasn't a break or anything. So that's where I think I would start off with the knee.
Okay, yeah. So we'll just kind of move around a little bit while and I'll just kind of follow your physical lead while we kind of share in another one of our very popular discussions. And I'm really just kind of speculating with the whole popular thing. I think we enjoy the discussion, and we're just hoping you all do too.
I enjoy the discussion, and I enjoy that when we are filming here, that it feels very clean right now. Like I don't have a lot of my crap around. A lot of times I leave things laying around in the layer.
Well,
and the layer can become a trap layer.
Okay, let's actually talk about that for a quick second, because anybody who knows you, anyone who's ever trained with you in your fit studio at the Wallen Temple, knows that you're pretty OCD about cleanliness and keeping things neat. And I would say that on occasion there might be like a rogue foam roller, or maybe rarely actually weights, because we're pretty good about like, let's put the weights back, but maybe a hip band or something like that. But I wouldn't say it gets out of hand.
Okay, appreciate that. I'm just looking out and going, wow, this looks nice and clean, and I kind of like it. So
yeah. For those that haven't listened to many of our previous podcasts, the dynamic here is Oscar is Supreme Purger. So what that means is he likes to throw
90-90, yeah.
everything away.
Yeah, so I think Supreme Purger is an amazing, like, either superhero or villain name for comics.
Well, being that this is a lair, it might be kind of a bit of a villain. But you could also be like that anti-hero. Yeah. Superhero.
I definitely be the anti-hero, where you're just not sure. He crosses lines, he crosses a little bit of boundaries, but he's likable. So when he murders someone, you're like,
but he did it with a smile.
He did it with a smile, and I mean, that person might deserve it. Some people deserve it.
Interestingly enough, we kind of touched on this a bit in our Spider-Man podcast, if you recall, with the amazing Comic Book Pete from Paper Asylum, also known as Spidey Pete, and so many other things. But he and we shared in that really awesome conversation. And this doesn't really give any spoilers, but we discussed that certain characters, especially in that film, you go, well, nobody's like necessarily good or bad here. And the interesting part of superhero / comic book type characters is that they can be both, because kind of as humans we are both, right? And I actually just had a really awesome conversation with Spencer Ackerman, who also is writing and wrote a few issues of Waller versus Wildstorm, and his hope was just that you could see a little bit of, like, I agree with this character in this page, but 3 pages down I disagree, and that's okay.
Yeah, I read the first 2 issues of that. It was very good. He does a good job of making you so there would be a quick line on something that makes you think about something that's relevant now. And it could be with the government, or the U.S. government intervention in a lot of other countries. Just little things that make you think, okay, that's interesting because that's in the comic book world, but also I think the U.S. does stuff like this.
They definitely do stuff like this. As a matter of fact, and not to kind of jump across to other podcasts, but uh, I had the privilege of speaking with, interviewing, hearing the story from Ronald, who was a victim / survivor of the Lahaina fires. And had I read Spencer's newsletter that comes in our mailbox,
Forever Wars.
Forever Wars, before I conducted that interview, I probably would have asked what the level of support the U.S. military had given to, whether it was emergency support or post, cleanup help type of support, because they do utilize Occupy and have an advantage of being in Hawaii because of where it's located strategically. I am no expert in this, and if Spencer is listening, I apologize because I will probably be butchering this, but basically because they have, I guess the word is occupy, right? Like take advantage of being in that strategic location. Like, what benefit then does it bring that state, right? And it just felt like so much more can always be done, but leading up to it, obviously there were problems, but I find that kind of interesting.
Yeah, it has it brings to mind things of like, what can we all be doing, right? Not just larger government, down to the person. So the beauty of writing like that is that it makes you think, and it hopefully then spurs you towards action.
Yes.
So
yes.
Yeah.
I mean, now we're just like basically talking about all of my previous podcasts, because this is where I always credit my dear friend Greg Rucka with spurring me into action through his comic book Lazarus. And while I was already very involved with certain types of volunteering or, just kind of being passionate about things, he really kind of challenged me to want to take action as a social justice warrior, which I do finally feel credible enough to be able to use that term to define who I am at certain times in my day, right? Or in my week or something like that. Whereas before I was like, well, I don't think I'm doing enough. But I do feel, especially after this last legislative success and journey, that is definitely something I can kind of put on my CV, have you? Or like kind of feel comfortable owning that. I feel, and this is something Spencer and I spoke about, like that imposter syndrome all the time. Like, are you doing enough? Are you checking these boxes to say that, okay, I am, XYZ. So I think we all kind of feel that in a lot of spaces.
Yeah, imposter syndrome is real. And I think imposter syndrome is actually a sign that you're on the right track, at least mentally, because if you have imposter syndrome, it's basically you telling yourself, am I good enough to do this thing? One, that's on a broader level, which we should kind of almost always answer yes, but by you asking that question, it means that you can do better, right? Like the question of like, am I doing enough? If you take it to the positive context, it's really just like, oh, I want to just improve as a person. So it's a good, you can reframe imposter syndrome to more of a positive spin, saying that, hey, I'm just trying to be a better person. I'm trying to do these things to the best of my ability. So I definitely still suffer from imposter syndrome as a fitness trainer, as a martial arts instructor, in almost every avenue. I'm always thinking, I don't know, should I really be doing this? I think that a lot.
Really? Mm-hmm. So it's interesting though, because you are so confident.
In what?
Well, you're such a good Kung Fu teacher. Let's take that as our first example. You get out in front of the classroom, you command the room. People really enjoy learning from you so much that you get feedback after class directly from students. I don't know that I ever get that. I think people run away from me after class, or they're just like throwing up in the bathroom or something. No, in all seriousness, the positive feedback you get is validating, but also kind of, I think that you feed off of that, right? And so next class you come back in and you're kind of like, yeah, they really enjoyed this aspect of class, or these, exercises I threw in, or this cueing or coaching or commentary or jokes or whatever it is you throw in. And then it makes you more confident each time you come back because you're getting that positive reinforcement. And not just from me, your wife / Sifu, like, oh no, yeah, good job. Because I'm sure you believe me, but because I would actually tell you the opposite if I didn't like something, because pretty open and honest that way. But I feel like it's even more so when you're getting it directly from the people that you're impacting, right? And so I think seeing you coaching classes, whether it's the kids or the little mantis, which are our tiny, tiny humans, or the adults or Tai Chi students, I feel like you are very confident in that space. So,
I think I can project that during the class. I guess what I always do is afterwards is question myself. So I'll teach a class, I might get good feedback. It comes back afterwards, and I'm like, oh, you know what? I did these things here which I could have done better. A lot of times it comes from watching someone else teach and go, oh, okay, that's really, I guess I could have done that, right? And sometimes you have an interaction and it may be positive or not, but for some reason I always think back after an interaction and say, well, what could I have done a little bit better? It's hard for me to realistically praise myself. I do jokingly say it. Like, so we have at Wallam Kung Fu, before and after classes, we kind of huddle together as instructors and discuss, hey, this is what's happening, or discuss what happened. And if it's amongst like younger instructors, I jokingly say, yeah, I taught class and it was amazing. And I'll laugh about it. But there is some part of that where I might think, yeah, I think I did a pretty good class. But the imposter syndrome, I guess the way I look at it is more of how can I improve, you know? How can I make it better?
I think this is also part of the Wallam philosophy of at our temple, especially where we're constantly doing the 1% Batzer each day, and just every opportunity to kind of question and ask ourselves, like, is this was good, and it was probably good enough to sustain and to maintain a certain level, but we're always trying to, raise the bar, have you? So I think there's where maybe that's also ingrained in you from that. I mean, it's funny, you and I talk to some of the kids. We call them our kids, but they're not actually our kids. Thank goodness, because I don't think I could feed anybody else in addition to Oscar.
Okay.
Just kidding. But we kind of talk to them about, the path that they're on, whether they're helping assist a coach or whether they're like trying to learn to be a better martial artist. It's like always reflecting back and like, okay, what could we improve on? What can we be doing better? So I think that's just kind of ingrained in what we're doing. But I think a lot of the younger ones, especially, we love to point out how long you and I have had this ongoing relationship of being friends to dating, to being married, to just now it's all in one. Like we basically just call it like 1996, to infinity.
I like that.
Yeah,
We kind of, and we do it in a soulful way and in a mischievous way.
Very mischievously. Yeah, see, you got that one real quick. And this is also, by the way, this is called the throwback to every podcast in the last year episode, where that's a little bit of our hip hop turns 50 with Jason 2 episodes, so you can check that out. But many of these kids were not even born.
Right.
And so to kind of go back to why I think maybe a lot of these things are hopefully ingrained is because it's like we've explored them together for so long.
I agree. I think the trajectory of, I've mentioned before, changed a lot, right, as we developed our relationship. So it's for the positive, as I look back. So here is where I'm really confident in, okay? And I don't feel imposter syndrome is when, it's going to sound horrible, is when I compare us to other relationships. I'm like, oh man, we're dope. We're awesome. And
especially because unfortunately we know a lot of people who have had failed relationships and then
or
had to
a lot of
challenges and just for some reason they want to come and tell us about it. And so we're unfortunately kind of that sounding board where we feel that kind of sadness for them, right? Because it's more of a reflection of like, wow, we're so fortunate that we have none of these type of conflicts.
Yeah, yeah. And it's a cliche of like, oh, every relationship has challenges. I'm like, I don't know. I mean, I don't really know too many challenges that we have. I mean, I guess there's been ways of dealing with each other's um, communication, um, dealing with each other's communications preferences that you learn, oh, this is just what they mean by this or not,
Yeah.
which is just part of the learning process. But I don't know. So that is where I will say I don't have imposter syndrome.
Well, okay, so this is a really interesting question because in terms of relationships, right? Um, we talk a lot, you and I talk a lot about communication in the classroom, how that's the most important thing. You communicate with your students, you communicate with your team, you communicate, and that you try to communicate effectively, clearly, etc. Right? And so you and I, like you said, sometimes just the dynamic of being male and female, there is a huge difference in how male and females communicate, and that's something that has to be learned over time and everything. So, do you think our relationship is in the place it is, which for our listeners who are unclear, like super positive, we really pretty much just don't fight, or it's not that we don't disagree on things, but I think that whenever there is any sort of even the startings of dissonance, it immediately can get fizzled out through quick communication, or just like, here, eat this really delicious thing, or oh, hey, I'm very funny, or whatever, right? Like it's never gotten to a point of like serious anger or anything like that, or me not wanting to spend at least 20 out of the 24 hours a day with you, and you not wanting to be away from me. In the way of which I'm like, no, where are you going? Oh, you mean to the temple? All right, I will go too. Like, it's where we're together a lot of hours a day. And lots of people, I think through COVID, mentioned that was just the downside, was like just being around people all the time that you weren't necessarily you're used to having kind of those breaks, right? And
Right.
needing those. Whereas I think I'm the bit of the opposite. I kiddingly always call you Vitamin O, and that's a shout out to my friend in LA who gave me that term in the early 2000s. And it's true. I feel like deficient if I'm not around you. So, but do you feel like it's because of the length of time, or just the nature of like who we are? Because I guess people who have been together a long time also maybe
Do I feel that it's because of the length of time?
that we're able to communicate well, or that you don't have imposter syndrome, it's because it's been so long?
I think that if you're invested in something, with my personality, I guess, and I think yours as well, is then you're just going to keep working on that to make it better, just like anything else. So it's not that it's hard work. It's almost like, well, there's interest, and because there's interest, you're willing to put in whatever effort it is to improve that situation, and then eventually just becomes easy.
Okay. So as we're doing our stretches, I will say I can't stay in the 90-90 too long before.
Right. So bending your knee
yeah.
is a problem. Yeah. So then I wouldn't do that. But I think another thing that is maybe not used a lot but can be used is you actually self-massaging, which I think you do a lot. But for example, if it's your left leg that's bothering you, and just relaxing your thigh and taking your thumbs and just working your way up the thigh, and you might find some areas that are, oh, this is a little bit tight, and just hanging out there and doing kind of a test retest, and just working, again, without me being physical therapist or a doctor or anything, I always am thinking, well, what can I do? Maybe by exploring different things, I'll release something. And then when you're introducing movement back in, reflecting back and thinking about the moving slowly towards that thing that caused me injury, like slowly approaching it. But yeah, I think if you're doing something and you're like, you know what, that's uncomfortable, then stop doing that. Because for most instances, your day-to-day movement should feel good. I'm not a big believer in doing things that are uncomfortable.
Right.
Well, I take that back.
Ooh.
I'm not a big believer in continuously pushing yourself towards the point of like, oh, this is
To failure.
This is going to cause me pain is good, but I don't mind discomfort, like because discomfort can be mental too. Like even the act of starting a workout recently, over the past year or so, every time that I have to do a workout, I'm like, oh my god, I got to work out.
But don't worry, he's a fitness professional.
But the reason is, there's certain workouts that I do, certain training sessions that I do that are moving me towards a specific goal. Like I have to recertify for the Strong First certification in a few weeks, and so there's certain criteria that I have to pass. So the training sessions are catered towards making sure that I pass that. And sometimes I don't want to do them, and I question like, why am I doing this to myself? But it is to just maintain a standard. And the same thing, even at the end of the day, as much as I love doing kung fu, sometimes like, oh man, we got to do this next class. I know that it's going to be a challenging class. And so I do move towards that discomfort, but I don't, in the middle of a training session, say, wow, this hurts. All right, I think that's good that it hurts and keep going. I never do that.
Right.
But
you're not a masochist.
Yeah. But if it's, well, this is uncomfortable, but my technique is still sound, I do push. I do like pushing into that situation. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel that I have to be in a mental headspace in order to do all of that. Like I feel very much that stubbornness, like, well, nobody else can really make me do something I don't want to do, right? And so I really have to be there. I have to be like, this is what I need to do, what I want to do. And this is something that I work a lot in therapy with, self-talk and using word choice that is positive and productive to getting me to do these things in a positive way versus like having a negative connotation. So it's like part of my mental health that I definitely struggle with, which is interesting because as a Sifu, you're really able to just remove everything for yourself and just everything is for your students at that moment. And so it's like the imposter syndrome comes in where I feel almost hypocritical, like, well, I wouldn't be necessarily in their situation like ready to jump into class, and I'm telling them, well, let's do a series of questions, and then the goal would be to get them into class, right? So it feels kind of a bit of the, well, I don't know that maybe because I don't have that person in my life that will mentor and guide me to do those things, because I don't know if it's my stubbornness or I just don't have that person for myself right now. But there is where my imposter syndrome kind of comes in, because I feel like, oh, I don't think I could, do your fitness class right now or something like that, right? Like, but I know that I could coach it if I had to, because I feel confident in certain areas. So I think this is where that I like to really live by being a student first and being able to make sure I can do everything I'm doing in my class. But like now my knee is injured, that's just not reasonable. And so I'm not going to do 100 kicks with everybody, but I'll try to do what I can and keep switching my legs. But it makes me feel like a bad example, I guess, because I'm not doing every single thing with them. But at the same time, we often tell our coaches, hey, this class isn't about you and it's not for you, it's for them. So it's just kind of sharing a bit of that mental kind of ping pong that goes back and forth in my head that I guess leads to a little bit of that imposter syndrome, where it's more like, I just don't want to be a hypocrite.
Yeah, I can understand that. I think of how many times in the beginning of coaching, you're aware of yourself as not being experienced, and so you have to push yourself hard so students can see that you're pushing just as hard as them.
Mm-hmm. Right? Or that you can do something.
And that you can do something.
Yeah.
Which I think is important, because we always reiterate the best way to teach is to show the example. Mm-hmm. But that just means that you have to show it once or twice. You don't have to then say, oh, my example is actually, we're going to do 100 kicks. I can do the 100 kicks just as well as you do, but better. So if you're coaching the class, you have to kind of take yourself out of that mindset. I think the other thing to think about is when it comes to things that you enjoy, we go back to there's an interest which leads to enjoyment, which allows you, when you're enjoying something, to do hard work to then eventually have an outcome. Any project that you ever do, you always just start doing it, right? So you're able to just say, oh, we have to do this thing, we're just going to do it. But when it comes to your knee, you're hesitant for whatever that reason is. But you could also approach it in the same way you approach every other project and just say, well, I'm just going to do something. All of that being said, number one priority should be your mental health. So if you feel it's a mental health issue, then you probably should take care of that first, right? But the skills of how to approach any problem you already have. So it doesn't matter. I think even if you had a really catastrophic knee injury, you can still approach how are you going to take this in the same way you approach every other thing that you do. There's no difference in tackling a problem if it's a physical problem or if it's a logistical problem or a business problem. Like, you have the mindset of what to do. Like, I can do that easily on the physical side, but I can't do that when it comes to, oh, I need to work on these things for my business. So that's just, I think, part of that has to do with interest. So like, instinctively, what are you really, really interested in? And maybe your interest right now is in all of the other things that you're doing. I always say, oh, I think I'm going to grow my business and do this, but I have such little interest in that, like real deep down interest. I have so much interest in exploring my physical capabilities that I'm always working on that. And it's easy to work on that. So that approach of, like, if the roles were reversed and I had a knee injury, I feel like I would just be doing something all the time because I'm super interested in it. But if our roles were reversed and I had to do all the stuff that you have to do, I wouldn't be getting any of this. I think I'd have mental breakdown.
I don't know, for me, the word interest covers it though. I think it's more of that comfort zone of like, I know that I can do this really well and accomplish it and get it done. Because it's just like cooking, because it's just cooking is so easy to kind of analogize to because it's so visual. Like, I do it really well, but I don't actually enjoy it as in the way of which people think I enjoy it. And it's like logistics and everything. I'm not interested in it. Like, I don't love doing those things, right? I just know that I can very well. And it takes me less effort than it does to, okay, I gotta go do my exercise. Like, it takes less, I guess, energy to kickstart or something, right? So for me, the switch is on or it's off. Like, I don't know that I have much of a dimmer.
Okay, well, how about this?
I think I'm on and off. So like, I just know, like, oh, I know that it's going to take very little energy for me to turn that on.
Okay. So how about this? I noticed that you can spend a lot of time researching when we're going to go on a trip.
Yes, that's interest.
Because it's interest.
Yes.
So, and because of your interest in it, you can excel in like planning and all that. Whenever there's a time where I have stress, then I'm going to revert to what I'm comfortable and interested in. Comfortable and interested in. For me, sometimes it's just coming in here and like moving around.
Right.
That is what it is. And for you, sometimes I see it being, let me research all these Michelin star restaurants in Tokyo, right? As like a comfort thing. So, I don't know.
That's my relaxing time.
Right. And I think if I had to do that, what you're doing as relaxing time, I would consider work, right? This is why everyone's a little bit different, right?
Right.
And what I'm doing as my relaxing time, you would be like, I don't have the mental capacity to go and work on my knee. So there is a quote that I heard, which I don't remember the person. I know that I heard it on Tim Ferriss' podcast, and I think I even read the guy's book, and I don't remember the book, but
well,
it was this.
Do consume a lot.
It was this quote that said, I'm going to butcher it. We can look it up later. But how am I complicit in my life and the situations that I'm in, right? And we're all complicit in unless we're living in this like totalitarian regime, right? Like we're all complicit in in the situation that we find ourselves in.
Oh yeah.
And I know I catch myself a lot of times like, oh, I got to do this thing or do that thing, but I usually choose to do every single thing that I want to do. And also, I talk a lot about mobility and stretching, but I don't like stretching. If I did, I'd be a lot more flexible. I would much rather do some kettlebell swings or
But not snatches.
get ups. I freaking hate snatches. Yeah. I mean, okay, I don't actually hate kettlebell snatches. I hate
doing
that
100
density
of them.
training, which was like 120 snatches, yeah, in a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
But like I would rather do, like Tai Chi class, like work on the Chen form or
Right.
work on, this long Kung Fu form called 36 hands. But I don't know. It's like but what do I always, maybe not out loud, but I say to myself all the time is like, man, I really need to get more flexible so I can get lower into my stances. But I don't spend as much time as I should doing that. It's my last thing. It's my last thing that I have to check off at the end of the day, but it's not the first thing. Does that make sense? Like I don't make it my priority.
But to me, you still do it, right? And so I feel like you have a certain discipline in that area. I mean, and this is just really a conversation to just kind of like explore like what goes through our head during these decisions. Because I think students often think, well, you guys and people, our family members, everybody always says stuff to
You're
us
in
like,
amazing
you guys,
shape
you get
because you're-
but also you work out all the time. I mean, well, for you, you do. Oscar does actually work out all the time, but they think I'm working out all the time because my job by definition is I am a Kung Fu teacher. And so in the minds of my family, like that means I wake up and I go to the school and I'm just like doing Kung Fu all day. And that is just not the reality of anybody who has a small business or owns a business or anything like that. You don't actually get to do
there's so many fires to
parts.
put out all the time.
Yes, constant fires. But also beyond that, I'm not just at the temple, right? I exist in the space of the whole Wallam system. And then I exist in a space of all the million projects that I probably don't need to take on, but feel passionate about, or it fulfills a certain part of me that I feel there's a void in or that needs to be fulfilled, which is I do get a lot of benefit and joy from teaching and it's enriching, but it is also kind of like my job. Whereas when I do social justice work or I do, things in that area, it's different. When I do podcasting, having these conversations now, it's stimulating for me. I get a different type of human connection than I do when I'm teaching because I'm a different person. I am a different person at the Wallam Temple as Sifu Mimi Chan versus the host of the Sifu Mimi Chan show. I'm actually a different person. And so I get to be a full person when I do all of the things, right? And so a lot of people wonder, like, why do you do so many things? Why do you have so many appointments? Why do you have so many Zoom calls or do all these stuff? And they all fill into these different categories, from social justice to my actual job extended, which sometimes means connecting with other countries or things like that in the martial arts, not even Wallam, or, ordering stuff from different, vendors and exploring that, like, just that's the work. And then I've got the things I do enjoy that stimulate me in other ways and enrich me in other ways that I feel that I do need to be balanced, right? And then trying to find time for rest. So I find it kind of an interesting thing where students or people outside looking in have a very different perception of us. I mean, I think their perception of you is fairly true. Like, you do actually work out all the time.
I don't know.
You are moving.
I do like to move around throughout the day. So yesterday was this, I had a session with Mr. Brett Jones, who's my coach. And then I had after that, I had a session with the kettlebell snatch stuff that I had to do. And I did that. And remember halfway through, I was like, man, this sucks. And I got through it. And towards the end, man, this is tough. Finished it. Wow, that was tough. And then that entire training part right there was only like 10 to 15 minutes, right? Then I proceeded, because I was behind on reaching out with some of my clients and responding to emails. I filmed a couple of videos to explain things to clients. And I spent, I think, 5 hours in my chair. And I felt horrible. Absolutely horrible. I got a lot of things done, but I almost wish I hadn't. Like, this is how bad of a maybe business person I am. I wish that I didn't get all of those things done that I did, and instead got up every 30 minutes and moved around.
Yeah.
So I checked things off. Yes, I did this. I got this video done.
Yeah.
I had a consult with someone. I contacted a lead back. I sent an email out trying to promote, all this stuff, responded to all of my clients, which is my job. And I almost wish I wish that I had moved around more, because the impact of what my body feels as normal was way off at the end of the day. I was just like, so anyway, that's, I guess, my way of saying that I didn't work out all day. But
the one day in the week where he decided he had to do the responsibilities that is his job, and I think that it still balances out. But I mean, in an ideal world, a lot of people do ask about this whole, how do you get to work out every day, etc. Right? But you do try to set a timer, and even if it's to get up to just do one thing, it's still better than nothing, right? So something is better than nothing. Right?
Yeah, but I guess to circle back to that point of that quote of like, how are we complicit in the situation that we find ourselves in? I think we're all pretty much complicit. We decide what we do. There are some things, okay, this is my job title and I have to do it. Like how you said, well, I've got to do all of these things. And there's so many things on that list that really only you can do. So that takes up a bulk of your time. But in addition, you're doing a bunch of other stuff that, even if it's work and even if it's challenging, it still stimulates you in some way, and you're choosing to do that. And we can't do everything, right? So then there's certain things that get prioritized that you can't do. And inevitably, all of us, every single person will complain about the situation that they're in. I think maybe I do it 10 times a day. I don't know. Like, why is this? Even if it's not out loud, it could be just internally. But you just have to ask yourself, well, how am I complicit in this? And the answer almost inevitably is, oh, I'm complicit because I'm the one who's deciding to do this. Even doing a job that you're inherited, you still decided to do it.
Right. No, I take full accountability.
No, and I'm not blaming you or not blaming anyone. I just want anyone who might be listening to think about that first. Maybe I'm too harsh sometimes because I don't like hearing complaints, right? And I think in some ways maybe you've heard me put out that vibe of like, oh, why is this person complaining? But I know that I complain also. Like, we all complain, and all it would take is just maybe 30 seconds of thinking about, well, hold on a second, before I complain, how am I responsible for this situation that I'm complaining about? And it's like 99.99% is you, right?
Yeah. I mean, I completely know this and think about it all the time. And
I think we all do, right?
It is the decision that I have made, and this is my life, and this is what's real, and this is what I've decided. So I don't disagree. I just feel like it's interesting to explore, because how people perceive you or me or us, right? How people are perceived isn't always like kind of what's going on in someone's head.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about before the perception that I'm the nice person and that you're not. It's totally the opposite. I just have this face of the facade of niceness. You have your realistic face. When you don't like something, you don't really hide it. When you like something, again, you don't hide it. I'm kind of the same regardless, right? And maybe that's being fake.
He doesn't like anything all the time, unless
maybe that's being fake.
Souffle.
Right, when it comes to food, I like that.
Yeah, you're very expressive with food, though.
Yeah,
you're very different. You do a happy dance. There's a lot of joy. But I think that at the end of the day, what's kind of important is just kind of always kind of questioning ourselves a bit, to an extent, so that we don't drive ourselves.
I like the to the extent part.
Bananas, because that's my thing, right? Like a previous me would have taken maybe like what you're talking about and have taken that to the nth degree of like, I need to I'm complicit in this. I have to take responsibility for this. These are my decisions, to a negative point. Like, I will take that all the way to a negative point.
Right. So then context matters because
Right.
that's how you would take it. And then this is where you and I are totally opposite. I don't take anything to the nth degree except for food, right? Like it's almost like, yep, I'm complicit. Okay, cool. And then I'll move on. And I
Right.
still, you know,
Right.
so but you're right. You have to be careful who you give advice to or you try to, project values on to
Yeah, because
and
people will take it in
however they
how
want
they need to hear it, or also how they think they're hearing it.
it. Hmm.
And it could be completely different in how you're sharing it, right? And so that's why we talk in our coaching a lot about, all right, so I would like you to go next door, bring me the boxes that are on the third shelf on the left. And then I'm like, okay, say that back to me. And then
Yeah,
you'll
you
get
want those boxes on the floor. Got it.
right. And then you go, whoa, wait, what? Or not
Mhm.
even boxes. Or like, and you realize, oh, okay, I gave too many. Okay, so I need you to go next door. Repeat that, and then you have to break that down. And I think this goes back to our communication discussion, which is you and I have a shorthand with communication because we've been around each other for so long. We have so many movie and music and podcast references and things like that I often say half things in my head and half things out loud and realize, oh, wait, I'm expecting people to read my mind. And my mind's going and racing so fast. I realize I have to express and clarify better, not go slower. That's the wrong word. Verbally, yes, I think I do need to slow down my speech because I talk fast. But I think that this is where it helps to kind of understand who you are as a communicator and then understand who you're speaking to as them as a listener and what that is, because sometimes you have to code switch or translate. And
Well, that makes me think of your evolution as a leader, right? Because I keep saying I heard this somewhere, but the a good leader isn't always a ball hog. They use a basketball reference, which we haven't seen watched
well, we
basketball since
watched
the
that one
90s.
documentary
We watched a
just
documentary
2
on
days
Steph
ago.
Curry. We
Yep.
watched
The Last
the
Dance.
right. So, for example, Michael Jordan is a great example, right? He was able to elevate his team, but a lot of times he is a ball hog, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in a leadership position, it depends on what the ultimate goal is. So his ultimate goal is we need to win a championship.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe the ultimate goal for Wallam is not we need to win. It's you need to move forward. And so what I'm coming back to here is your leadership style was like Michael Jordan before. He was like, well, I can do everything. Give me the ball, boom, I got the three. I'm going to take it. I'm going to dunk it. And there's an issue where you can wear yourself out,
Yes.
but also maybe not give I'm not accusing Michael Jordan of this, by the way, but also not allow other people to thrive because you're doing so well, because you're able to do so many things so well. So this is where, again, the evolution of you as a leader, you've learned to I'm going to listen more. I'm going to see if I can be clearer with my instructions. All of these things will empower the people around you and give them skills to then improve, right? And let them knowing I could have taken that 3-point shot and I would have made it. That person took it, they failed, but they're going to learn from that, and in the long run, it's going to be better for everyone.
I think it's the goal, right? But I love that you're comparing me to Michael Jordan. That's pretty awesome. but I think it's interesting because I think my leadership style has changed, but I think my communication style has definitely changed. And I'll say this, and I think this is a little bit of a can of worms that probably needs to be opened at a different time. But since we're there, I will say there is a specific reason I was so abrasive and purposely, maybe even, I don't know if mean's the right word, but very strict and more of a harsh teacher in the past. Because as a 16-year-old instructor to 28, right? You're so young as a female. And I'm not saying it was the right way, right? But I felt like yelling and being very intimidating and being very abrasive was the easiest way or a sure way to gain a bit more respect. Like if I had tried to be, I mean, people probably think this is really funny, as nice as I am now, because I don't know that people think I'm necessarily nice, but I don't know that I would have been able to command the room, the system, the teams, the students that were significantly older than me. Like, I think I felt like I had to be a certain way. And I don't know if that any of that is true or valid, but I do know as a woman, as a young woman, right? A teenager to adolescent to like, to like a young adult, like a 20-year-old, I felt that I had to be extra. And I had to be extra in order to get what I needed to get across and done and not questioned.
Right.
Because I didn't have leadership teaching me a better way, because I know my 20-year-olds, my 16-year-olds, they don't need to be that way. But I have used all my experience to now share this with them. Like, here is how you can do that, right? I didn't have anyone to kind of guide that, right? So I feel like those were the mistakes that I had to make and learn from in order to then, bring that forward.
Yeah, so there's the part where you didn't have, here's how to be a leader, other than male examples who are much older. And then you also were in the 1990s, which is the environment has definitely changed and improved in 2023.
Yeah.
Right.
There's always the respect for women is
and so,
radically different.
So
right?
there's always like, oh, can we do better, just like anything else? But there's both. So you have now younger female instructors coming up under you that you're actively guiding, and they're in a different environment. So it's completely different. So
they're also in an environment where it's established that there's female leadership, which is so different.
Yeah, so they're not only being guided, it's not only 2023, but also they're looking like, oh, the leader of the Wallum system is this, female. So it's different. You can't look back and go, I mean, I think it's good to explain it, right? To explain for me.
Well, I hope this would be the judge someone, you can't judge someone, in the history of that time. Like certain language was accepted at a certain time, right? Like we talk about, like, you can't, what is the quote? I'm totally
you can't judge someone. You can't judge someone in the past by the
standards of today. Yeah.
And that, I think, everyone deserves second chances, right? Unfortunately, even us knowing that, we know how impactful first impressions are. So you're saying this, and if there may be former students that you have that looked at you a certain way, and that's the way they originally looked at it, it doesn't matter you make the explanation or not. They have to be open to understanding that concept of, oh, okay, people do change. And some people don't. I don't think some people think that way, but I think a lot of people are open to doing that, because all they need to do is just reflect back and say, oh wait, I'm also different.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, I think so. And not that any poor soul that I may have like traumatized or anything like that from yelling at them or something, whatever, listen to this conversation to understand like where it was coming from at the time. And it's not an excuse but it's just, I think it's interesting to kind of think about that, right? And to think about like, well, we say, okay, we're not going to judge this author for the language they used in this book in, the whatever 1900s versus like now we know we don't use, these terms and things like that. Like, we're not going to judge them by the standard. But I don't know that we as humans are as forgiving when it's not something so tangible, right? Because then it's our memory of like, well, Sifu Mimi was this person, and
so explain more about tangible. You're talking about like
a book,
physical
like you could
interaction,
see a book.
or
no, you could see a book and you could see, okay, this is what the writing is in 1930, and then now it's 2023. We're not going to look at a 1930 book, and it's but whereas you think about, when I coached class when I was 18, compared
they're
to how
basing on
now.
memory.
Yeah, there's so many factors. It's just not as tangible. It's not as like
I see what you're saying.
able to be kind of grasp.
Right. You don't have this physical, like, written document.
Yeah, like
saying
here's
is what
this,
happened.
and obviously
Right.
we can look at that as an analogy. This is
You're
a
going
bit
on
more
feelings, memory,
experiential, and
experience.
yeah, I mean, and that's like I said, this is, I think, another whole nother discussion that we didn't prep for. Not that we prepped for any kind of discussion, to be honest, to our listeners. We're just hoping that you care about us enough to hear what we have to say.
Yeah, I mean, I think to your point of, like, who's listening, obviously, because the world revolves around us, every single person that we've ever interacted is tuning in to everything that we say, and then we're going to be fine because they'll listen and say, oh, Mimi and Oscar saying something. I hung out with them back in 1994. Let me go ahead and
the great years of hip hop.
let me go ahead and listen to this podcast because I had this. But I think reality is that the best thing about this, doesn't matter who listens, is you verbalizing something that makes you contextualize your thoughts a little bit better, and then hopefully then you have a better understanding of how you act moving forward, right? That's what the benefit of having a conversation where you're exploring different things and then realizing that maybe upon further observation, oh, we can change something, or maybe, okay, I'm going to stick with this idea for a bit.
Yeah. And I do hope, though, that we do have Wallam listeners and that they're able to kind of get a better grasp of who we are as people, because I think that's important too. And, you know, we do have a lot of Wallam family out there all over the world. Just wanted to do a couple shout outs for Wallam family at this moment for some gratitude, but also some praise. Is I wanted to congratulate my too much talking today. Congratulate Sue Ellen from Brazil, who, you know, Brazil is not an easy place to be, I think, in this 2023 place and time. And she went to China, did a competition, represented her country, but also, you know, as a Wallam member, we're really proud of her performance. And so shout out to her, our Wallam Brazil family. And I think she won like 3 bronze medals. So yay. And also gratitude for Wallam of Malden member Alan Mazzoni, who is not just a patron, but a super patron, which means just like one at the highest level of support for this podcast, for the work I do. And it is so meaningful to have people out there that actually feel like they want to support this and that, you know, literally like extend themselves in that way and are so generous. So I really appreciate that. And I really feel that it's just so inspiring for me to keep going and motivates me to keep going. So thank you for that. Love that. And I love that you are Wallam family. So thank you, Alan.
That's excellent. I think I heard somewhere that the average podcast doesn't get past episode like 5 or maybe 10. Yeah, because there's so many podcasts that go out and then eventually someone goes, whoa, this is too much work, and they stop. So
we are at 352, I believe.
Which is amazing. So so you're at the top percent of being consistent and following through, because some people, they stop at 5 or 10 or 20, or like, this is episode 100. I'm done, right? They have a certain goal, and that's when they're going to stop. And it's nice to see, you know, you continuing. The cool thing is you have patrons, right? People who support you. You have listeners who actually come up to you and tell you.
Yeah.
And then whether positive or negative, we get comments too on things. And I always look at that now as it's a good thing, because, oh, that means someone actually listened.
And they're engaging.
And it doesn't matter if I agree with that comment or not. Like in the past, I'd be like, yeah, whatever. But now I'm like, hey, thanks for listening.
Yeah.
Even though I don't agree with your comment, I appreciate that you took the time to do that.
For me, one of the biggest things that's been just such an impact in my life is the friendships I've made through this.
Yeah,
and
so many.
The conversations, which is why listeners are like, you haven't had anyone new on in forever. Like, I just want to keep exploring the depth of conversations with the people that I got a chance to get to know and meet, because there's so much more for them to share and for me to learn from, and hopefully all of you as well. So yeah, I love that this podcast has been ongoing for so long, so consistently. I mean, I really only try to take the holiday break, the Chinese New Year break, and then very intermittently through the years are there like some repeat episodes where I just like, hey, people probably haven't heard this from season 2 or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
meaning year 2, because this is definitely not seasonal. It's like constant, it's all year round. Maybe I should think about something seasonal, but I'm going to keep going as long as I can keep enjoying the conversations. I love building the relationships I've had. I love having these conversations, and it feels so amazing to be supported by my patrons. So thank you all so much. And we'll wrap it up there. Thank you to our listeners who keep commenting. Oscar really likes to, interact with you. So keep the comments coming, everybody.
Whether positive or negative.
All right. Until next time. Bye.
That's all for today's episode. Thanks for listening to the Sifu Mimi Chan Show. Please subscribe and rate my podcast on your platform of choice and leave a review. You can become a patron of the show at patreon.com/SifuMimiChan to help keep this podcast going. Follow me and interact on social media at Sifu Mimi Chan on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook.